BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Hello everybody, and welcome to this special weekend episode of Black Box Online Radio. Last night, at about 1 a.m., I just picked up my phone, and I got on Instagram, and I saw a post from the Catch Long Island Serial Killer page that shared some breaking news, and that is that the Fire Island Jane Doe has now been identified, and she finally has a name connected to her, and she's been identified as Karen Vergata. And this is just another major true crime development. Definitely the biggest true crime news story of the year is that the Long Island serial killer, or possibly the Long Island serial killer, has been identified as Rex Heuermann, an architect from New York City who's 59 years old, and he's been charged with the murders of the Gilgo 4. And as we'll see, that there are going to be some big connections. However, the Gilgo 4 were murdered from 2007 on to the later part of that decade. And one giant question that all of us have is, was this man responsible for all of the Long Island serial killer murders? Because there were crimes that took place from 1996 to 2003 that the media doesn't seem to talk about very much. And one of them was the murder of the Fire Island Jane Doe, who was unidentified for years, and only until recently has she been identified as Karen Vergata. And I've been following some of the articles that have been coming out, and I particularly liked one from the Long Island Press, which was written by Michael Malashik, and I'm going to be reading that one, just citing the source. The Fire Island Jane Doe has been identified as a woman named Karen Vergata, according to Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney. On April 20th of 1996, Vergata's legs and feet were found on the bay of Fire Island, about a mile west of Davis Park. In 2011, additional remains, including a skull, were found at Tobay Beach. And if you were to have asked me about 3 days ago, what can you share about the Fire Island Jane Doe? I mean, I did a full episode on her story for the Long Island Serial Killer series that I did back in 2021. However, if you were to just ask me, share some basic facts, I would say that back in 1996, two people were out walking and they encountered a gruesome discovery of two legs that were alone on a seaside area. Yes, her legs were discovered, and they knew that someone had been murdered. They knew absolutely nothing about what she looked like. They weren't even able to identify the woman's race completely. But of course, in 2011, they were able to find the skull amongst many, many other discoveries that were made. The serial killer graveyard, that's the famous story that's always been shared, that they uncovered all of these bodies on, well, Gilgo Beach and Tobay Beach and some of the surrounding areas. And then the skull is what was used to draw the composite sketch of the Fire Island Jane Doe, who has since been identified as Karen Vergata. And I'm just going to have to get used to calling her that, Karen Vergata. And this is an amazing discovery. And when the victims have a name connected to them, they can finally rest in peace. And there is just an additional layer of humanity that is brought to the situation. But I'm going to go back to the Long Island Press article. The skull was found after the partial remains of Jessica Taylor had been found on Gilgo Beach. Taylor's other partial remains had been found in Maynardville, on the same day as the additional remains of Peaches were found on Jones Beach. Peaches' other partial remains had initially been found at Hempstead Lake in 1997. She was 34 at the time she went missing, and I believe that statement refers to Karen Vergata, not to the Peaches Jane Doe. Miss Vergata went missing on February 14th of 1996, Tierney said. She lived on West 45th Street in Manhattan and was believed to be working as an escort at the time of her disappearance. There was no missing report complaint filed. Okay, somebody asked me this question on an episode about the Peaches Jane Doe just a couple days ago because since Rex Heuermann has been arrested for the Long Island serial killer murders, or the Gilgo Beach murders, excuse me. He's only been charged with the murders of the Gilgo Four at this point, and we're just trying to find out was he responsible for all of these crimes going back to 1996? But what somebody asked me was, in 1997, the Peaches Jane Doe was murdered, and how do these people go unidentified for so long? Why weren't missing reports filed? I mean, if you haven't heard from your sibling or your child or your family member in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, don't people go looking for them at all? And the honest answer to that is no. Some people can become estranged from their families. Some people can disassociate from their families. Some people can just cut off all contact, and not everyone goes looking for their families. And in these tough situations, a lot of women turn toward escorting, and the victims of the Long Island serial killer from 1996 all the way to 2010 were almost all involved with escorting, and the exceptions would be perhaps Baby Doe, who was the daughter of Peaches Jane Doe. And it is true that this serial killer graveyard was unearthed about 13 years ago, but the authorities knew very well for years that a serial killer was operating. They called the serial killer the Maynardville Butcher, and the theory was that the Maynardville Butcher was responsible for murdering Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, and that there were also male victims that were connected to the Maynardville Butcher, and the theory involving male victims is not highly accepted. However, Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were always on confirmed victim lists for the Long Island serial killer mystery. The authorities stated very clearly that they thought the same person was responsible for the Gilgo Four, as well as the murders of Karen Vergata, the Peaches Jane Doe, Valerie Mack, and Jessica Taylor. So as you can see, this is coming together, and all suggests a single serial killer. And I entertained the possibility of multiple killers, but I stood by that claim from the beginning that I thought there was a single serial killer. Now, Ray Tierney added a statement that after the Gilgo Beach Task Force was formed, the FBI was able to identify Karen Vergata as the Fire Island Jane Doe using a DNA swab from a relative. Tierney declined to comment on any suspects in Karen Vergata's death, and Rex Heuermann remains charged only with the deaths of Amber Costello, Melissa Bartolome, Megan Waterman, and he is the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Those are the Gilgo Four victims, and yes, I think Rex Heuermann did it, but innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. He added that they are still investigating the other bodies, including Vergata's. This is a confidential investigation. Tierney said, other unidentified victims of the alleged Long Island serial killer include Peaches Jane Doe, her daughter Baby Doe, and an Asian male. Now, I also found on a different post, I'll try and pull up for you guys, that Rex Heuermann, I always want to say Heuermann because I knew someone with a similar name and it was pronounced Heuermann, but Rex Heuermann was the prime suspect as well in the murder of Tshirts Jane Doe, and she was murdered in the early parts of 2007, and several months after the murder of Tshirts Jane Doe, there was the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, the first victim of the Gilgo Four. And now there is another article that came out from the New York Post by Olivia Land that says, sons of newly ID'd Gilgo victim Karen Vergata not notified about death until after press. The sons of Karen Vergata who were identified as the children of the Gilgo Beach victim found dead on Fire Island more than 2 decades ago were not notified about her gruesome death before the official press conference announcing the discovery Friday. I mean, talk about being disconnected from the family. Eric Doherty, age 32, was distraught when reached by phone Friday afternoon after authorities confirmed his mother, Karen Vergata, was the previously unidentified woman whose remains were found on separate occasions in 1996 and 2011. He just thought that Karen Vergata was missing, his girlfriend Michelle Nolan exclusively told the Post on Friday afternoon. Eric and his older brother, Kerry, are the biological sons of Karen Vergata and a man named Gunther Lind, but were adopted as young children by Edward and Diane Doherty in 1992. The boys, who grew up with some knowledge of their biological mother, were not informed that her remains had been identified. We didn't have any information," Nolan said. "Their adoptive mother just called to let them know." And I think that means to let them know about what had happened, the reasons why they were being adopted. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney's office did not immediately respond to the Post request for a comment on the situation, but he claimed at Friday's press conference that the victim's family was made aware of the discovery. Yes, but the whole point of this New York Post article is that they learned about it because of the media. They didn't get any type of outreach from law enforcement. And you guys know that I'm a big follower of the Lord and Arts channel, which is run by John Lorden. And one thing that he had proposed was there almost needs to be an intermediary. There should be like a new profession that is created, a liaison in between law enforcement and the victims' families. Now, of course, they don't want to compromise the investigations, but just reaching out and saying, yeah, your biological mother has been found and discovered and identified. And back to the New York Post article. Eric briefly spoke to the Post to confirm that Karen Vergata was his mother, but was otherwise too upset to provide further details. "I think she was a drug user," Nolan said of Vergata, who disappeared after February 14th of 1994. She was 34 years old. The young mother was struck by a truck when she was pregnant in the late 1980s, according to Nolan. Gary, now 34, was born with cerebral palsy as a result of the accident. Well, I'm definitely sorry to hear about that, and that sounds like a very large story in itself. Karen Vergata may have sued the trucking company on her son's behalf shortly after his birth. Eric was born in 1990, and Vergata took off after that. She was a drug user, and her father took her and helped her for a time. No matter what anyone says about the actions of Karen Vergata, no matter what anyone thinks about the choices that she made in her personal life, and the way that she conducted herself, she did not deserve to be murdered and have her body mutilated and have her legs cut off and thrown on a beach and to be decapitated and have her skull wash up on shore or be discovered. People always get very technical when I talk about something like that. She did not deserve to be murdered this way. And this just goes to show that more and more true crime discoveries are happening in the world. And think about everything that's happened in the last 2 years. We've seen the discovery of Brandon Lawson's remains. The murder of Nancy Benelak has been solved. We've had an arrest in the Long Island serial killer case. And just one day I'm hoping that we'll be able to say that the Zodiac Killer has been identified, and that there are answers in the Zodiac Killer mystery, maybe even in Jack the Ripper some way, somehow. But it goes to show you that these high-profile true crime cases can be solved. These high-profile true crime cases are not going to remain cold forever, and DNA is the key to solving many of them. And the Long Island serial killer mystery is just a story that has more and more doors being opened. More and more barriers have been shattered. For example, for the longest time, Valerie Mack was unknown. She was referred to as Jane Doe number 6. She went unidentified for 18 years. Her remains were first discovered in the early part of the new millennium. She was murdered in 2000, and in 2018, they identified her as Valerie Mack. And I've noticed that with the early victims, only Jessica Taylor was truly and positively identified in 2003, and that was because of a tattoo that she had, not because of DNA. And then it's just using DNA and forensic investigations to identify the other victims. And it's working. There are answers. The case is solvable. And I hope there will be a conviction, and I also hope we'll get direct answers as to who committed the murders that have been attributed to the Long Island serial killer. And rest in peace to Karen Vergata, and I hope that there will be more breakthroughs in the Long Island serial killer mystery. Alright, my name is Ned DeHaan, the host of Black Box Online Radio. Signing off. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook, My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there was always BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram. And I will see you over there. Until next time.